Mamod Traction Engine Restoration and Upgrade, Part 1, Disassembly. This will be a short video series on the restoration process and upgrades to a Mamod traction engine. I purchased this engine from eBay UK, and as you can see it isn't exactly mint condition, but it's certainly repairable. So let's start with the traction engine itself. It has a reversing lever, so it's from 1967 or later. And it has a boiler plug rather than a sight glass, so it's before 1978. So what problems can I see? A front wheel is missing. The steering fork is mangled quite badly. The chimney isn't attached. An exhaust pipe has fallen off, but it came with it. The canopy is dented and warped, and the bracket bent too. I think all these problems relate to one incident. I suspect this has fallen from a height at least once. The rear wheels have been put on backwards. This itself isn't a problem, but it does mean someone has had it apart in the past, so it could mean other things are incorrectly assembled. The scuttle and burner are missing. Now this is a common problem when buying these second hand, and really needs to be considered when you decide on what you're going to bid. Keep in mind a good second hand scuttle and burner is going to set you back another £10–15 each, or even more for a meths burner. Also in this view you can see the scuttle hooks have been flattened. I'm not sure why or how this would happen. All of these are problems I saw on the eBay photos before I bought it. Now there is one thing I should have noticed but didn't. The whistle lever is sat directly on top of the whistle, meaning it is stuck on, or more likely the spring or rod has broken. In this case the rod has broken and probably isn't logically repairable. I have spare whistles, so this is no biggie. Now for something you can't always tell by photos. Are any of the fittings stuck? What can happen is the brass fittings seize in the brass boiler bush. They can seize strong enough that when you try to unscrew it, they break the soft solder that holds the bush to the boiler and leave you with a bush that spins in the boiler and won't come out. This is known amongst Mamod fans as a twisty whistle syndrome. I have a few Mamods with twisty whistle syndrome, so this is something I'll do a video on in the future. I got lucky as none of these fittings were stuck. All threads look good too, as well as the sealing washers, or so I thought. Upon closer inspection I can see that the sealing washers are delaminating and have become very brittle. They are 50 years old, so you can't expect too much. Here I'm checking the safety valve. These can seize up with limescale on the moving parts. Mine hasn't and moves freely. Now time to disassemble the engine. It's really all held together with one bolt called the trunnion bolt. This is undone with the 3/16 socket. Be aware the whole cylinder and reversing lever is going to fall apart when you do this. Try not to lose any of the parts, including the little washer that goes between the spring and the reversing lever. Next the flywheel comes off. Your engine might have a bolt securing the flywheel to the crankshaft. If you do, lucky you. I think most are like this one, a very light press fit on, which is fine, but they can seize. If they do seize, be aware that the seize joint can be stronger than the crank web joined to the crankshaft. If your flywheel doesn't come off freely, a little heat might help, or I would recommend soaking in something like diesel or WD-40 and using a small gear puller, just to eliminate the risk of breaking the crank web off the shaft. Luckily again mine came off very freely and even had traces of oil between the parts. I'm guessing whoever took this off last oiled it during reassembly to make it easier for the next guy to remove it. Whoever did this, thank you. Next the front wheels can come off. Under the smoke box there is a square threaded washer that stops the front fork falling off. The whole fork assembly simply unscrews like so. Yeah, I don't think this is usable, or logically repairable. I have one in my spares, so it's no biggie. It must have been some fall. Looking at this, I'd say the front wheels hit the ground first, then rolled onto the front of the canopy, breaking off the chimney and bending the canopy bracket in the process. Next, I removed the rear wheels, and yes, I took the wheels off and put them back on the correct way for the sake of the video. There are many methods to remove the hubcaps. Every Google search result seems to have a different answer. Realistically, the best method is probably to file the two detents off the hubcaps and replace with new ones. They're pretty inexpensive and it would save the hassle of trying to save them. However, it's certainly possible to save them. The method I prefer uses two spanners. The axle is 1/4 inch or 6.35mm, so here I use a 7 and an 8mm spanner to pry the cap off. This is a bit fiddly to do, especially while trying not to block the view of the camera. You can see the sheet metal of the firebox bending, but it mostly springs back when the pressure is off, and only requires little straightening easily done by hand once disassembled if you're fussy like me. Most of the force of the bottom of the spanner is on the edge of the firebox, which is strong enough to take it. You could put masking tape or paper between the spanner and the wheel if you don't want to mark the paint. The end of my axle was a little burred, possibly from the last guy hitting the caps on too hard with a hammer. The burr was minimal and I could have easily just pulled the wheel over it, but I'm too much of a perfectionist for that. With the wheels removed, I start on the smoke box, and thus start removing the pop rivets. The last traction engine I disassembled, I used a drill and found the drill just wanted to bite the aluminium rivet, breaking it and spinning the head without actually drilling it. I have yet to find a method of removing pop rivets I'm totally happy with, but here's my best method for now. I use a drill truck on its own to hold a 3mm drill. The pop rivets are 1/8, so just over 3mm. A 2.5mm drill may work better for this, but I didn't have one. Turning the drill by hand allows more control. You may notice in the video I broke the first rivet. Ignore this, I pushed too hard. The next 3 went fine. You will feel when the drill hits the mandrel head, the little bit of steel left over in the bottom of the rivet from the pop riveting process. This is when you stop, as you'll never drill this by hand, and you've drilled enough by now anyway. Because the rivet is 1/8 and now has a 3mm hole in it down the centre, there is very little wall thickness left. I used a countersink which I turned by hand while pushing down quite hard to shear off the head. Next I use a punch to punch out the rest of the rivet. I've used a 3mm punch, but I really should have used a 2.5 or even a 2mm punch. You will see why soon. I barely hit it with a hammer, despite what it looks like in the video. With the rivets removed, the smoke box didn't want to come off. It's an aluminium smoke box on a brass boiler that gets steam in it. It's only natural for these two parts to corrode together slightly. If it is only lightly stuck together, I usually get away with using WD-40 degreaser, so I'll try this first. I quite like this product and I use it for most lightly stuck together parts, usually successfully. Unfortunately, not this time. Next, let's try some heat. These boilers are only soft soldered, so care must be taken not to melt the solder. The actual boiler end cap is up by the steam pipe. There is another cap down by the smoke box, but this is only to give the boiler a bit more strength around the smoke box and does not hold pressure. Please note that if you're doing this to a steam roller, then there is only one boiler cap, which is right on the end of the boiler, which holds boiler pressure and is the strength for the smoke box. I'm using my Worth butane soldering iron as a blowtorch. Here is why I should have used a smaller punch. You can see here I've clipped and slightly bent the boiler cap flange. This is virtually not even a problem, as this cap is only here to give the boiler a bit more strength around the smoke box, and this amount of damage won't affect the integrity of the boiler at all, but it's still something that should ideally be avoided. Next, I remove the canopy bracket. If your traction engine is more modern than mine, you won't have this. Instead, you'll have 2 slots above the scuttle hooks. It's here where I lost my magic at removing rivets. These are still 1/8 rivets, so a 3mm drill is used. Next to come off is the engine mount, still 1/8 rivets, and again they got the better of me. A die grinder with a small round stone and WD-40 would probably be a better solution. As these rivets only go through thin sheet metal, they don't have much to grab onto to resist rotating. so as soon as the drill has a little bit of engagement, the rivet just spins. I don't own a die grinder, so I just struggled with files and pliers. Next up, it's the boiler rivets. These are sealed copper, meaning the end of the rivet is closed so it won't leak steam under pressure. They are still 1/8, so a drill no bigger than 3mm should be used. With the rivets removed, the boiler will slide out. I'm not going to unsolder the engine bracket as I don't see the need to. I think the inconvenience of cleaning and painting while assembled outweighs the inconvenience of having to solder it on again. The final boss, if you will. These rivets are aluminium and 3/32, so no bigger than a 2.5mm drill, ideally a 2mm drill will be used. Once again, these rivets outsmarted me, but this time I filmed the whole thing so you can see me struggle. You may notice I have dented or bent the sheet metal in a few places. This is nothing a little gentle panel beating won't fix, but again, best avoided if possible. So there you have it, a pretty much fully disassembled Mamod Te1a. I've roughly straightened the firebox, but it will definitely need to be better than this before painting. In the next video I'll be degreasing, paint removing and cleaning, showing a few different methods. Thank you for watching, and I hope I've inspired you to start on your own STEAM project.